Well, the developments on the recent UIF fraud allegations levelled against 3 ministers in government, including Employment and Labour Minister Thulas Nxesi, have created a media storm. This and the revelations made earlier in the year by Eskom CEO Ruyter, when he told the media that a minister said he should allow others to eat, are some of the brazen claims implicating executives in government. While none of the allegations have been tested, these reports just continue to throw a spotlight on the trust deficit between government representatives and the South African public. Dr. Fikile Vilakazi from the Department of Public Policy Department at the University of KwaZulu-Natal joins us, as well as Dr. Dale Mckinley. He's a Research and Education Officer at the International Labour Research and Information Group. It's great to have both of you. Welcome to this Friday edition of Morning Live.
Thanks, Leanne.
Thank you, Leanne. I am now with the University of the Western Cape.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for the correction. We'll definitely sort that out. So UKZN to the Western Cape, good to have you with us. Thank you. We will correct that for you. So let me ask straight up. I mean, I sort of have been giggling saying, do we trust politicians? Dr. Vilakazi, yes or no? Do we trust our politicians?
Good morning, Leanne, to you and to viewers at home. My immediate answer is no. I think South Africans have experienced a lot of mishaps in the hands of politicians, and I think you can see in the last couple of years how trust has has gone down, among citizens in relation to trusting politicians, mainly because of the high levels of corruption that we have been made to experience. So my answer is no. Okay. I don't think that it's that much of trust. I think we have a lot of deficit.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Vilakazi, that's the short answer. I'm going to ask you, Dr. Mckinley, the same question. Do we trust our politicians?
No. Simple as that. And I was just referring back to an Afrobarometer survey a couple of years ago, I think the last one that was done, that showed that across the board, that trust in politicians was about 27% of the respondents. Now that's very, very low. And the biggest trust, which we would be glad to hear, Leanne, at that time was, in fact, the media, which enjoyed a trust percentage of around 60%, and the courts and judiciary. So besides obviously those kinds of surveys, I think it's very clear that in the last several years, that ordinary people, not just in South Africa, but across the world, have lost a great deal of trust in politicians precisely because the gap between what is being said and what is being promised and what is being delivered, it's not simply corruption. I think it's a perception that politicians are in it for themselves. They really, really aren't listening to people, and they have become separated in many ways from what ordinary people are experiencing. And I think that's where, when you don't trust somebody, you don't think that they have your interests at heart. And I think that's the fundamental crisis, not only in South Africa, but across the world, in fact, with our political classes.
Yeah. Basically, we've kind of ended the interview already with the reason that we don't. I mean, that's the basis of our interview, is the fact that do we or don't we trust politicians and public institutions? And the problem is that we don't. And it's a huge problem. But perhaps instead of ending it, we might as well carry on and see how we can fix this, because we're sitting at a time, and let's bring, I'm wearing a sports shirt at the moment, so I suppose I am thinking along the lines of sports. And I'm going to bring you back in here, Dr. Vilakazi, because we're a country that's sitting, and it's already starting to fade. I can start actually from the Monday when the president went on TV and we wanted to hear about a public holiday, and he kind of gave us a State of the Nation address instead, talking about how well they have done for all of us while they've been in power. And all of us are sitting there, and only at the end did we hear, not a public holiday now, it'll happen somewhere in December. I think it was the 15th of December they've given us that break. But this is the problem, is that we come off this high and we want to continue on it, and then it's like, are you kidding me? So, this whole sports thing that we're seeing, Dr. Vilakazi, what do you make of it? I mean, we can't honestly depend on a rugby team to bring us together. We need a lot more than that, surely.
Leanne, I will start by saying that sports plays a fundamental role in building social cohesion, right? And we have seen, not in just rugby, but in a number of our sports disciplines, in athletics, in soccer, our teams are doing fairly well. And I think probably my take is that sports is one of the things that makes us happy as a society in South Africa. However, I do not think that our government is maximizing that possibility of bringing us together in a way that, it takes the country into confidence to say we are capable of rebuilding ourselves, of healing ourselves. I mean, if you look at the rugby team itself, has represented South Africa very, very well. The athletic team has done the same. The women's soccer is doing the same. Banyana have been taking and flying the flag everywhere in the country. So suffice then to say, I think it was highly disappointing to see politicians then just hijacking that space for political gain, but it's again not surprising. However, I think that we have potential in sports. We have potential if you look at characters like Umama Joy, for example, who's just going out there and say, I'm a citizen of South Africa, I will stand and fly the flag of South Africa and show the world that regardless of all the problems and the pains that we carry as a nation, we are able at least to find some solace in sports. And I think our government need to look into that and see how we can rebuild South Africa and regain trust in society by investing in sports. And sports is one thing that brings young people into activation. Government is not investing a lot in sports to make sure that we activate our young people, but also in a way that looks at sports as a source of income also for young people, so that we don't have the majority of our youth in this particular case who are highly unemployed, idling in society. And I think that is a setback. But otherwise, my take is that really we have an opportunity in sports to galvanize our society and to heal ourselves and to probably even regain confidence about possibilities of reorganizing South Africa as a society that is capable.
Yeah. No, I mean, if we just carry on that, and then I'm going to get more into. I just want to begin by talking about the whole issue of the sports and perhaps finding things to leverage the trust within society and the promises. I mean, we've been promised professional leagues for women, promised all of these kind of things during the fun times, during the times when we're all celebrating, and then you get the president saying after the Netball World Cup, we're going to have facilities, we're going to get a training facility when Banyana were doing well, we're going to work hard to make this now a professional league. And we sit and we wait and we wait and we wait. And then we get somebody like the EFF leader, Julius Malema. And Dale, let me bring this to you, who then sort of, while we're all on our high, then opens a debate to change the logo of the Springboks and then almost starts pulling South Africans apart again. However, that was quite an interesting situation. And Dale, perhaps you want to comment on that, because isn't it amazing how we all hugging and loving each other when the Springboks win? And then he throws that little bit of salt down and suddenly we start fighting with one another again. And then we start seeing the separation. We're a very fragile society. And, it is the politicians and the people with the platform that perhaps can divide us and very, perhaps too easily. So again, that trust in what a politician like Malema was saying in terms of the Springboks, and is it real or is it, just again being a politician?
Well, I think first of all there is a serious debate about transformation in our sport. I mean, let's not forget that this has not been something that is specific to Julius Malema or the EFF, but his timing and I think the sense of reading the public mood was completely off. I go back to the 2010 World Cup. Many of us were quite critical of that as a this was celebrated. It was a nation building thing. It brought us together. I likened it to a drug where you basically take it, you get very high for a while and then you enjoy yourself and you come down after the fact. I mean, we were left with massive debts. We were left with white elephants. We were left with a lack of soccer development. And I think this is the problem with politicians in particular. And we see it across society. We see it in the relation to people from the rest of the African continent, with using the divisions and the desperation in society to divide people, to make conflictual relations between people from other countries in our continent. Here, we see it across the board with gender-based violence. Saying one thing, and I think that's the fundamental problem, is that if we have politicians that don't have a public ethos, that basically are in the game in order to protect their party or advance their own interest. And we started this conversation with a sense of, listen, there's a charge of corruption amongst very senior government ministers, however that turns out. The problem is that there's always deniability. No, we didn't do this. No, we're going to take you to court. No one ever begins to talk about how over the last 20 years, that corruption has basically destroyed our country. How politicians have a case to answer, irrespective of whether we individualize that or not. And I think that's the fundamental problem with ordinary people when they see a political class that is so completely immune in some ways to a criticism or to opening up and being honest about things. When was the last time we saw a politician say, I'm sorry? When was the last time we saw a politician apologize? When was the last time we saw a politician fall on their sword and say, I resign as a result of bad decisions or bad things? This is what we need in this country. And as if we don't have that, then you're right. What happens is we have sniping, we have more conflict, and the politicians feed that. And then they wonder why, at the end of the day, our country is not growing, our country is not coming together, our country is not able to basically move forward. And they try to deny that it's them that are playing a major role in that. But fundamentally, they are at the center of this crisis.
Yeah, indeed. I think their job is to keep us apart as opposed to bring us together. And that's the fundamental part of it. So now we move on to the story that we saw that's out and about this week, where obviously it's about these ministers that are being implicated. It's not being tested. But if you listen to both the social media and mainstream media, public conversations to be very unsympathetic towards the ministers, and the public almost seem to believe the story, even though we don't have concrete evidence about any corruption going on. But you know, this is where we're at. So the public jump towards the negative side automatically, you know, without it being tested. And perhaps, you know, what you were saying, Dale, is why, because we never see anyone fall on their side and there's always absolute denials. But Dr. Vilakazi, let me get your perspective on this. You know, people just, you know, they just automatically assume they're guilty. There's just, you know, another form of no trust.
Yes, Lee, and I mean, why that is happening is mainly because South Africans don't trust our politicians, right? If you look at the outcomes of the 2022 corruption index globally, it shows South Africa is one of the 43 countries amongst 100, you know, that have been perceived to be corrupt. And that's not a good thing, because we want to be number one, you know, the cleanest country in terms of corruption. But our experience, Leanne, has shown that whatever happens, whether it is about sports, whether it is about health, education, politicians always find a way to put their hand, you know, in a way that benefit them, but not society. And we can't blame South Africans then when we have a knee-jerk reaction that says, when allegations of this nature come into the public domain, South Africans will say, it's not the best of its kind. You know, we know it has happened before. And of course, also because the Zondo Commission report has not really been implemented effectively. So we do not want to then blame citizens. Citizens are hurt. Citizens are in pain. We are wounded as a nation, and partly and mainly because of the corruption that is sitting in the hands of politicians. So the fact that South Africans are saying, we know, you know, Fikile Thulas, Nxesi, the ministers that are implicated, they probably have done it, is something that I don't think we should take necessarily light, because it's something, in fact, that is signaling to politicians to say, account to us. Did you do this or did you not do this? And that is something that has been coming very slowly, and viewers at home. And for me, it also shows that public trust has gone down so much. I've done research a couple of years ago, just briefly, to say that South Africans have indicated in that research that we do not trust government, because even if we give government ideas and opinions through these public hearings and public engagement processes, government and politicians end up doing their own thing anyway, regardless of what we say. And I think that deficit emanates from that deep place that says we can't trust the political system in the country. It has failed us. It is not working. It is dysfunctional.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at sort of, you know, South Africa and Dr. Mckinley, very quickly, if I can get you to respond to this. I mean, another anomaly is the ability of this nation to move on with no repercussions. It's just, well, here we go again. I mean, for example, the Presidential Security Advisor, Sidney Mufamadi, who declined to name the high-ranking politicians linked to corruption by Eskom's former CEO, Andre de Ruyter, but did confirm that he was present when de Ruyter made the allegations. You know, I suppose the question is, why do you think there is less appetite for the government's institutions, like the NPA, to investigate, finalise and prosecute these claims?
Well, Leanne, I think that we're still living with the legacy of the state capture years. Our institutions were seriously damaged, and they still are. I mean, we can see that in the state-owned enterprises. We can see it with the chaos still in the NPA, the lack of capacity, the massive deficit of skills, other kinds of things. This doesn't just get turned over overnight. But I think fundamentally what, the real issue here is that not only in South Africa, but in several other countries, what we're seeing state institutions turned into vessels of either the ruling political party or of particular private interest. We've seen it. It doesn't matter. It's not a third world issue. We've seen it, for example, in Poland, where the Justice Party basically took over the judiciary, changed the laws, made it impossible for them to prosecute politicians. And I think this is the real problem. As we see the rise of a right wing, this populism we see in the United States, is this notion that politicians are above everybody else, that they can basically use and abuse the state as they see fit. And as a result of that, I think the arrogance and the sense of impunity has risen to such a level that you can get a politician coming into a public platform, making all sorts of promises and making all sorts, and going essentially at the same day, going out and doing the exact opposite. And what is now showing is that people, it's not just the trust in the politicians, it's political parties and the electoral process. This is where the danger really lies.
Yeah.
If ordinary citizens begin to lose trust in our democratic institutions, that same survey that I mentioned says that over 60% of South Africans wouldn't mind seeing no elections at all if they had a leader that delivered basic services. And this is the problem. If we abandon democracy and embrace a much more populist, authoritarian situation, which we've seen across the world, then that trust deficit turns into a real democratic crisis.
Both of you, thank you. Thanks for joining us. I could carry on this conversation for at least another half an hour, but we have to wrap it up. And I just think just giving us the gist of where we're at as a nation and that trust deficit that certainly exists within South Africans towards politicians and public institutions. I mean, NPA, SSA, the NPS, the Hawks, all of that. That's one thing that certainly is one where we feel we need more. Dr. Fikile Vilakazi from the University of the Western Cape, and Dr. Dale Mckinley, Research and Education Officer at International Labour Research and Information. It's 8 o'clock. Let's get your news to you.